Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson, and today I'm speaking with Jennifer Chow. She is the Managing Director and CEO of Chimeric Therapeutics. The ASX code is CHM, and they are in the area of biotech, in the area of cell therapy, and they have a couple of, what would you call them? Drugs?
Yeah, drugs, assets, therapies.
Assets. That's the word I was looking for, Jennifer. Assets. They've got a couple of assets in clinical trials. So this is a really exciting time for this company. I love it when words don't come to me. But Jennifer, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to Small Caps.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thanks for having me. I am thrilled to be here to talk to you about what we're doing.
Well, I've done my research. I've had a little bit of a look about Chimeric. It's a really interesting time for the company, but this is the first time you've spoken to our community. So give us a brief overview of who you are, what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to. So our company was formed about just over 2 years ago, Carrie, and we focus very much, as you said, in cell therapy in oncology. So purely in cancer therapies is where we are focused. And what we're developing are known as cellular therapies. And if you think about that, the most simple form, Carrie, of a cell therapy is a blood transfusion. Cell therapy is, it's all about when you're using cells to basically work against a disease or, something that is wrong with someone. In our case, we're probably taking a step or two steps further than a simple blood transfusion, where we're actually engineering cells to be able to very specifically target and work against people's cancer. So that is the space we're in. This particular area has seen incredible outcomes in the last 5 years, where for the first time, we're able to say we're actually curing patients with blood cancers. So patients that had cell therapy, really, first time, right? We're curing cancer.
Wow.
And so, it's pretty exciting, actually, to be part of it. So we have patients that received cell therapies 10 years ago. They had a complete response, meaning at the time, all of their cancer went away. And then they were followed. And now 10 years later, we know they're still cancer-free. And so, finally, scientists and clinicians are saying, okay, after 10 years, we don't think this is ever coming back. These patients are cured. So we've seen these incredible outcomes with these therapies.
Was it in conjunction with chemotherapy or anything like that, or were they just using your particular drug?
So not using the drugs we have our assets, but using drugs that are using the same types of technologies on blood cancers. And so, one of probably, I'll tell you from me personally, Carrie, I've worked on 4 of the 6 approved CAR T cell therapies. And so some of the drugs that I've worked to develop are exactly these drugs that have had these outcomes with patients. Okay. And I've had the incredible opportunity to meet some of the patients who were told, there really isn't much we have for you, go home, get your affairs in order. And then all of a sudden found their way onto one of the early clinical trials for cell therapy. Right. And it is amazing when 5, 6, 7 years later, they're sending you pictures of them and their families out at Disneyland or traveling around because they're still alive and they're thriving and they're doing incredibly well.
Okay, so Chimeric, your particular assets that you have, because you said you started 2 years ago, what attracted you to the company and what is so exciting about what you guys are doing at the moment?
Yeah, it's a great question because at the time, I was with a company called Kite, and Kite is arguably the leading cell therapy company in the world. And that's where I came to prior to Chimeric. For me, I had worked, like I said, on a number of the early CAR Ts and saw the outcomes that they could have for patients. And joining Chimeric was really about being able to think about how do you bring those outcomes to more patients? So instead of sort of working on the assets that I already, knew were approved and they're available for blood cancer patients, what I saw in joining Chimeric was this opportunity to be able to identify and discover new assets that had the same type of potential for patients and develop them and get those out to patients. So that's really what drew me to the company. And it's really about how we've spent, the early days of the company building, is really identifying assets around the world in different institutions that we felt had this incredible level of promise for patients that could potentially be curative, and bringing those into Chimeric, licensing them into the company, and then working on moving them into development so that we could get them out to patients.
Okay, so what makes what you're working on different from what others are working on?
I think in the oncology space, and I've been on oncology a very long time, Carrie, traditionally in oncology, what we've been trying to do is we've used targeted therapies or immunotherapies, and we're trying to delay cancer progression, right?
Okay.
So we're trying to say, oh, I can make it so this patient's cancer will stop growing for 6 months or 9 months, right? And and there's some great outcomes, and there's definitely benefits that we've given to patients by developing therapies like that. I think what makes this so different is our goal here is no longer just disease progression. Our goal is curing cancer. So it's a much more ambitious goal, right? We're now not looking just to say we can get someone another 9 months or another year with their disease not progressing. We're looking to say, look, we want to completely eradicate your disease so that it is gone and you don't have to think about it anymore. So I think the goal is a lot more ambitious.
Okay, so with that ambitious goal, where are you at? Talk to us about, and I don't want to do too much of a deep dive into the science, if you like, but what I want to know is, what are the milestones? Where's the value for shareholders or potential shareholders going forward?
Yeah, I think, let me start by saying probably the most exciting piece is that we already have positive clinical data with 2 of our assets. And so when you think about the path to get these assets or get these therapies developed, right, you sort of start by having preclinical experiments, which is really, in a lab or in animals. You move them into patients and you kind of look at it in early days of patients, and then you move them into bigger trials to get approval. For us, we are already out of the preclinical stage with 2 of our assets, CHM-1101 and O201. And we're in clinic. And with CHM-1101, we've already seen in our phase 1A trial positive signs and patients responding to CHM-1101, and that's patients with glioblastoma, which is the most lethal form of brain cancer out there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, those patients, generally, it is incredibly sad, Carrie. Survival for patients with glioblastoma, maybe a year or so when they're diagnosed. It's incredibly sad. And so what we're starting to see already, and we're in the early days of the phase 1A clinical trial, is that the patients are having a response to our CAR T cell therapy. So that's incredibly exciting. And then with CHM-0201, similarly, what we've seen is we have seen patients having a response to that asset, which is an NK cell asset. And that's actually been in a phase 1A trial that's already done. And probably the best, part of that asset and that story is that there is a patient that was in that phase 1A trial. She was a young woman. She had acute myeloid leukemia. She had tried all of the normal therapies you would get if you went to the hospital. Nothing was working. Her disease continued to progress. She had the cells, CHM-0201 cells, and 100 days later, her disease was completely gone. And we now know, even better, Carrie, we now know 2 years later, her disease has not returned. So, we continue to follow this young woman and see how she's doing. But we now already have a patient where we've seen cells that we're developing, take her into complete remission and keep her cancer-free for now more than 2 years.
What a fantastic area that you're working in, because it's human, and you actually are. I mean, as you said earlier, you're curing cancer. I'm getting all sort of excited here, because is anyone else as far down the track as Chimeric at the moment?
I think in other companies are in different places with different disease areas, right?
Right. Yep.
So, as you can imagine, when you start to see curing cancer as an outcome, lots of people start developing in the space.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, one of the things that my team and I do is really pay attention to what development is going on. I think, from in Australia, we're certainly further ahead just being in clinic. A lot of the Australian cell therapy companies are still in that preclinical space. When we think about the bigger community in terms of cell therapy companies around the world, our assets, CHM 1101 and 2101, are both what we refer to as first-in-class assets. So nobody is ahead of us with those assets, Carrie. We are the very first people to be developing those assets, and we are way out in front. With CHM 0201, our NK cell platform that actually has this young woman that had the 2-year response already, we know that there are other people developing similar NK platforms, but we actually believe ours is first in class, or best in class, because we think that we've already been able to show that it works in areas and in ways that other NK platforms have not yet been able to demonstrate.
So what are the next steps? And let's just take it through, if you like, because are those the 3 assets that you're focused on at the moment? Great.
They are.
So I think for our audience, I want to see what are the next steps? What are those milestones where you believe it's going to add massive value to the company?
Yeah. And I'll take them one by one, if that's okay with you, Carrie.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So 1101, which is our chlorotoxin CAR-T that is being studied in patients with brain cancer, with glioblastoma. That particular trial, by the end of this year, we will have completed the phase 1A and be able to give results on that trial. And I think, generally from a company perspective, that is probably going to be the nearest term, really, really significant milestone, is being able to show what happened to the patients in those trial, in the totality of that trial, and how did they do. So by the end of this year, we plan to have that trial completed and at a high level summary of what the data looks like there. So we see an incredibly significant milestone with that asset right there by the end of the year. With CHM 0201, that asset moved from the phase 1A trial, where we had this woman with the 2-year response, and it's now moved into a phase 1B trial. And that trial is currently underway at Case Western University in Ohio. And we actually anticipate that by mid of next year, we'll have the results from that trial.
What's the difference? Sorry to interrupt you. What's the difference between a 1A and a 1B?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think people ask this all the time, is a phase 1A trial is really what we refer to as a first in human trial. It's the very first time you're going to put your drug into patients. And so the way that it's built, Carrie, is it's what we refer to as a dose escalation trial. So what we do is we start by giving a very low dose of the drug to patients. Not that we believe that that low a dose will always give any sort of therapeutic benefit, but we want to see that it's safe because it's the first time you put into a human. And then essentially what we do is we up the dose over a period of time. So usually in a dose escalation trial, you start at a low dose, then you come to a second dose that's a bit higher, you move to a third dose that's a bit higher. And in our CHM 1101 phase 1A trial, we actually have 4 dose levels that we're completing. A phase 1B trial is then what you can do after you've completed the phase 1A and shown you've got safety in the different dose levels. And with a phase 1B trial, generally what you're doing is you're picking the best dose that you had in your phase 1A trial, where you saw the best efficacy with patients with the least side effects.
Got it.
So then you take that dose and you then treat a number of more patients to really be able to show or demonstrate that you have now more efficacy results available and not just safety results. 1A is more focused on safety, 1B becomes focused on efficacy.
Got it. Okay. So 0201 is going into 1B. And how long does that take? Is that 2 years, 5 years, 25 years? What's the
Definitely not 25 years. So 0201 is in 1B. The first patient in the phase 1B trial was actually dosed in January of this year. So that was a great milestone for us to have achieved at the beginning of this year. We anticipate that particular trial will be fully dosed. So all patients in the trial will be dosed by the end of this year, beginning of next year. We anticipated it would be about 12 months. So the first patient was dosed this January. By next January, we anticipate all patients will be dosed. And then you follow the patients for 100 days, so just over 3 months, to really be able to assess how are they doing. So that's why I say that we anticipate by the middle of next year, we'll have data on that phase 1B trial to announce as well. So that will be the key milestone there for us.
Yeah. And 2101?
Yes, 0201.
0201. But then you've also got a third asset.
I do have a third asset. I have a third asset that is CHM 2101.
2101. Yep.
Now, this particular asset is not yet in clinic, but I can tell you that there is an incredible level of scientific excitement around this asset. The data for this asset, the preclinical data for this asset, Carrie, was published last year in probably what I would say is the top publication in the world, Nature Cancer, for publishing scientific data. And it was actually the cover story because the results that we're seeing, in the preclinical studies were so amazing. So what we actually saw was with this particular asset, it was looked at in 7 different types of cancer. And in every single one of those 7 different types of cancer, when CHM 2101 was given, the cancer was completely eradicated and it never came back. And so that all of that preclinical work was published in Nature Cancer. There was a huge amount of scientific excitement, around getting this asset into clinic. And so we are incredibly excited because that is now what we are obviously working towards and see happening. And with 2101, the big milestone is going to be getting that asset into clinic and getting that first patient treated. And we see that happening in the next 12 months, Carrie. So for us, that's the other really critical milestone.
That's, excuse me, that sounds to me like if the scientific community is so excited about it, how did Chimeric how did you get your hands on it?
Yes, it's a great question. I get asked that all the time, right? And I will tell you that I got asked that by a lot of people in my field when the Nature Cancer publication came out. Oh my God, you guys have that asset. How did you get that asset? What I will tell you is a lot of what they said to us. So the asset, we licensed the asset from the University of Pennsylvania, which is arguably probably the most well-known, world-renowned center for cell therapy development in the world. And when we actually said to them, why did you license it to us? What they told us is it really had to do with our team. So there were 4 different groups at the time that were putting in, sort of offers for the asset.
Oh, okay.
And we were doing it. So it was a competitive process. And we met with the inventors and we met with the scientists at Penn that had been working on this asset for a long time. And we had a lot of great conversations with them about how they had built the asset, what would we do with the asset, how would we develop the asset. And at the end of the day, what they said is, we had full confidence that your team knew what to do with it, would take our science and really build it into something that could benefit patients. So, I think we were incredibly proud that I think we felt like it definitely was our team that allowed us to get what we think is going to be an incredible asset.
Well, I'm kind of excited for you because, well, first of all, congratulations, because if it's a competitive tender and it was the team behind it. So I guess just briefly, because we are running out of time, how did you attract such a strong team to Chimeric? Was it that like chicken and egg? Who came first?
Yeah, you know what? A bit of both, right? Because our team has grown a little bit. So I think it's a bit of both. What attracted, I think, a lot of people to Chimeric is our assets. Right? Yeah. Cell therapy space, there are more job opportunities than there are people that have the right experience because it is a pretty young field.
Okay.
And so it really is, it's really key to be able to attract people that have the right experience, the right expertise to develop these assets. All of my team has extensive experience in this space. And I think they're, for a lot of them, they came because they looked at the assets, did their own diligence about the scientific validity and the promise of the assets, and really thought that the assets we had can help change the course of cancer for patients. And then I think the other part of it, Carrie, is really it's a group of people that have taken and worked in big cell therapy companies like BMS, like Celgene, like Kite, and really we're looking for an opportunity to say, hey, what can I work on that I can really help cure cancer for patients that don't have therapies yet? So it was really also this sort of passion to be able to get behind the mission that we're really trying to move forward.
Jennifer, do you reckon people know that the asset you have, and I want to go back to, because we spoke 1101, we've spoken about 0201, they're great, they're in clinical trial, but it's that, like, just from your body language, I'm looking at you going, 2101, which was on the front cover of that magazine, do you think that, especially I guess down here in Australia, I don't think Australia's cottoned on to the fact that this is such an important asset. I just love your view on that.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Carrie. I think because it's not yet in clinic, I think it's probably been a little under the radar, right? We've been getting all of the technical operations, all of the documentation we need together to get it into clinic. And so it probably is something that hasn't really generated a lot of discussion or excitement yet. And so to your point, I agree with you. I think it probably is the one that people are least familiar with when they think of Chimeric, but it is certainly one that from our perspective, we believe has incredible promise and are incredibly excited about getting it into clinic.
Are you listening out there in small caps land? 2101, just saying, not financial advice. When do you think it's going to get into clinic?
We would anticipate we'll treat the first patient within the next 12 months.
Oh, wow.
So that would be an incredible milestone for us. Again, when you're talking about these nearest term milestones, sort of what have we got coming in the next 12 months? This is one we're focused on.
All right, we're running out of time, Jennifer. I'm so sorry. Look, I'd love to. I need to get you back as soon as there's some more news, because it's certainly opened my eyes to what you're doing there at Chimeric, and I really appreciate it. Look, I'm not going to go into it in great depth, but if people will probably say, why didn't you talk about the share price? Your share price has been smashed, as has every other biotech around the globe. Do you think that 2101 and getting people to understand the fact that you've got these great assets is going to change it? Do you think Australians don't quite get it?
Now, you know what? I think you're absolutely right. Our share price has been hammered, like everyone in the biotech sector, unfortunately. From our perspective, Carrie, I think our focus is on continuing to push the development, because I really believe it's only going to be by putting out more clinical data and showing what our assets can do that we're going to be able to really get past what's going on in the biotech market and raise that share price. And from a 2101, so I think the 1101 data coming at the end of this year is going to be a big part of that. I think the 0201 data that can come in the middle of next year will be a big part of that. And 2101, Carrie, I will tell you, I've had analysts and tell me, institutional analysts say, just that one asset alone would make you worth 5 times what you're worth right now. And that's, just on one of my 3 assets. Yeah. So I do truly think that our share price is not reflective at all of our pipeline or the promise of our assets. I think we just really have to get to the place where we have more data to show people and be able to get that out there so that really we can, have a better reflection of what the value of a Chimeric really is.
Yeah, and I think what I always say to people, you've got to have a look at the management, you've got to have a look at the team. Final question before we get into the wrap up: has management got skin in the game?
The management all has skin in the game. Yes, okay. We very much all have skin in the game. I think first and foremost, from an equity perspective, we all have skin in the game. So we are all just as committed as every shareholder to raising that price it impacts all of us. And then, in terms of skin in the game, I think for us, it's also about getting these assets to the people that need them.
Yep.
And really being able to show that we can get these things out there and move them.
And change the world, curing cancer one step at a time. Jennifer, we have run out of time. Let's wrap it up. Give me 3 reasons why people should sit up and take notice of Chimeric right now.
3 reasons. Okay. Number 1, Carrie, would absolutely be positive clinical data, right? Mm-hmm. I have 2 assets that already have positive clinical data. So that would be first and foremost. Okay. You already have a signal something good's going to happen. Number 2 is 2101, right? So this asset that has not yet gone into clinic has huge potential, and I think that will be an incredible catalyst for the company. And I think, honestly, number 3 is I just think we're incredibly undervalued right now, right? I think where the market and the biotech market has us right now does not reflect in any way, shape, or form our data, our programs, our pipeline. And so I truly believe that, we are going to have inflection points that are going to see us jump significantly over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. So, from my personal perspective, that is something that I think, is critical to be looking at.
Well, it's certainly a pretty exciting time. And I could see that 3 assets, 2 in clinical trial, 1 going into clinical trial, that 1 alone going, because I know that the other 2 assets have also got a lot of value. But yes, there's a massive game changer in there as well that I don't think the market has recognized. But I really appreciate your time coming and chatting to us on Small Caps today. Come back and tell us when you hit another milestone. But for now, Jennifer Chow, great to chat to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Carrie. This was a very enjoyable talk.